And after 1967, gradually, the United States became the exclusive mediator and broker in the attempts to bring peace between Israel and the Palestinians. Not surprisingly, a lot of Palestinians who write today about that peace process called the Americans the dishonest broker, because they did not listen to the Palestinian demands. They just saw themselves as a mediator whose role is to convince the Palestinians to accept the Israeli interpretation of the reality and the Israeli interpretation of the peace process. These three decisions would not change and would inform all the Israeli policies ever since 1967. One important implication for this Israeli strategy that emanated from the debate of whether to rule directly or indirectly the West Bank and the Gaza Strip was the decision of the Israeli labor movement that was controlling Israeli political life between 1967 to 1977 to divide the West Bank and the Gaza Strip into actually two areas. One area where Jewish settlements would be built, where the government would encourage Judaization or Jewish colonization of the areas in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, creating Jewish settlements. And the other area is an area which would be populated only by Palestinians, areas which were already densely populated by Palestinians. This was called the Alon Plan. Yigal Alon was the Minister of Labor in the Israeli government of 1967 and a hero of the 48 war. And it was his idea to create this partition, if you want, another partition in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip between Palestinian and Jewish areas in the new occupied territories. However, this plan was complicated by the appearance of a messianic Jewish movement after 1967 called Gush Emunim, the Bloc of the Faithful. This group emanated from the National Religious Zionist Party, and they believed that 67 was the act of God that enabled the Jews to return to the heart of what they called the land of Israel, the biblical land of Israel. They found out that according to their archaeological and religious understanding of the Bible, most of the holy places for Judaism were actually in the West Bank and not in pre-1967 Israel. And these areas, which they deemed as the heart of the ancient Jewish land, were at the heart of densely populated Palestinian areas. So they began to settle in those areas that actually the government didn't want Jews to settle in. So two maps of settlements, one by the government and the biblical map of the Messianic movement, meant the Jewish colonies appeared everywhere in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. And these settlers, either beforehand or in hindsight, would receive the support and help of the Israeli government. After the rise of the Likud to power, the right-wing Israeli political party Likud under Menachem Begin in 1977, who believed that the West Bank was part of Greater Israel, even more than those in the Labour Party, the colonization and settlement intensified, and even more Jewish settlers came to the West Bank and to the Gaza Strip, harassing the population, creating a state within a state, and pushing the government to expropriate more land and to oppress the Palestinian neighbors around them.